So this evening I'm going to talk about laughter and the science of laughter, and I think it's fair to say that laughter is a topic that's been largely ignored in science, and particularly in sort of the sciences you'd have thought might be really interested in it, say neuroscience and psychology. And this seems to be for a couple of reasons. First of all, psychology has very much defined itself certainly in the West, as being in relation to understanding normal behaviour in the light of abnormal behaviour. So when we've addressed emotions and human emotions, we've very often thought about negative emotions rather more than positive emotions, because we are trying to understand situations where things have gone wrong. People's experiences are unpleasant. We're trying to understand that. So there just simply has not been a great deal of research into positive emotions, and Barbara Fredrickson has argued strongly that this is to the detriment of psychology. We could understand a lot more about humans if we were to look more at positive emotions. I think there's a second reason why laughter may have been specifically somewhat under-researched. This is an example. Brace yourself, this is an ethics form which we've printed off to tell people about who are taking part in a study. You'll see the phrase genuine laughter is used there because it's a study on laughter. We printed off a bunch of these. It's got the study's got ethics, this is what this is telling people about, and all our names are on there and what the study is. One of my UCL colleagues took this pile of consent forms off the printer and was so incensed by what they saw on it that they wrote this note saying, this pile of rubbish, this pile of people seems like rubbish because of the nature of the material, asterisk, and will therefore be disposed of if not collected, asterisk, is this science? No, but I think there is that about laughter. I think it kind of triggers a sort of, it's a little bit trivial, a little bit ephemeral. And what I'd like to try and argue tonight while I'm talking about the science of laughter is that there's something more up to it. I think it's a really important emotion. And I think it's not only interesting to study, I think it may actually be essential to know more about laughter. So I'm going to start by giving you some examples of laughter. This is the chap at the top left here laughing. He's laughing at the baby, you can hear. And then you're going to hear another, this is from something called Skype laughter chain, which is just people all making each other laugh. I just want you to listen to the laughter itself. The next laugh, this chap down here. Okay, this is a man who's laughing in a way that I almost find distressing, top right. That really is him laughing. And then this is a lady at the end. This truly is her laughing.
Oh mon Dieu, c'est quoi ça?
One of the really weird things about laughter is how utterly bizarre it is as a behaviour. It's a non-verbal expression of emotion, so we make it in a way that's quite unlike speech. But even within the parameters of that, it's much more like an animal call than it is other sounds we make. If I came back and said, I've been travelling in the Amazon rainforest and I found these new primates, this is the sounds they make, you would not be totally surprised if I then played you these noises. Now, what it actually is in terms of it's also simultaneously got this kind of characteristic of being something we're massively, massively fond of and we have great affection for. And there's a lovely quote from W.H. Jordan saying, among those whom I like or admire, I can find no common denominator, but amongst those whom I love, all of them make me laugh. Now, I think that's a rather nice quote, and it's kind of getting at that sort of love, the way love and laughter is often bound up together. What I'm going to argue is that Auden got it almost completely wrong, though. It's not that we love the people who make us laugh. We laugh around the people that we love. It's a behaviour that we show because we love people. So going from love straight to a really important part of the body, the rib cage. So again, psychologists don't normally zero in on the human rib cage, which is, again, probably a mistake on our part. It's a really interesting bit of the body. I need a couple of volunteers to lend me their rib cages. Is that possible? Could I? Would it be possible for you? That would be really, really kind. Thank you. Are you okay to come? Could we possibly get a couple more people to come forward? You don't have to stay down here. One more person to join them? Thank you very much. You can just pop down here. Now, what we're going to do is actually look at some people's rib cages in real time. I know, woo, rib cages. That's because what we're going to do is actually look at people's rib cages moving. Now, the rib cages here, you can see these are the ribs, and the really interesting part about the rib cage is how the intercostal muscles between the ribs actually control the movement of the ribs. And we're going to see this by putting breath traces on people. So this is just measuring how the rib cages move. What we should hopefully see is that they're alive. Because when we're alive, we breathe. And this is not them. This is a recording we made earlier, as we like to say. And this is showing the sort of sinusoidal movement. So imagine, you can see where the breath belts are. As they breathe in and out, you can see the rib cage moving in and out. And that's because when you breathe in, you use the intercostal muscles to bring the rib cage out and up. This creates negative pressure inside the lungs. You draw air in, you relax the rib cage back down, you breathe back out. So that's metabolic breathing, and hopefully it's what everybody's doing, not just the people with the breath belts on. The really interesting part about breathing is that we actually breathe completely differently when we are talking. And in fact, only humans can do this. So when we are speaking, we use those same intercostal muscles in an entirely different way. So this is now a breath trace of somebody speaking. It's me taking a breath in. And now what I'm doing to make this breath trace is I'm keeping speaking without taking another breath. And when I do this, at first, my intercostal muscles have to prevent all the air from rushing out through my larynx. And then after a while, when I really run out of breath, they had to start squeezing the air out. And if I keep speaking without taking another breath, I absolutely have to squeeze it out. And then I have to take a breath again. You can see that happening here. So that actually you're seeing a very different pattern of control. And it's phenomenally fine control that allows you to do this. We can only do this because we walk upright, and we've freed up our rib cages from having to bear our weight, which all other mammals have to do with their forelimbs. We don't have a feeling for this, but actually we have as much fine control over our intercostal muscles as we do over our hands. It's a phenomenally precise movements that you're doing that enable us to speak. And if we look at what that's doing while we're speaking, you're making, just like somebody playing a reed instrument, you're making a constant pressure below the larynx, and you're using that to vibrate the vocal folds. That's how you're actually making a sound. We've got a hero man here. I'm not going to do this to you guys, but a hero man here who is speaking.
Hello.
So these are his vocal folds here.
I haven't had visitors in so long.
What are you?
I'm a voice box. Some people call me a larynx. See my two vocal cords moving apart and together as I talk? They come apart so that the air can get through them, and they come together to vibrate and make sound as I exhale. Let me show you.
I'll be perfectly honest, it's a little bit terrifying, isn't it, the larynx bit? We've all got one, and it's just probably time to move on. So the only way that you can make that sound is by actually what you're doing at the rib cage. So when you speak, when you have music in your voice, you've got duration to what you're saying, there's rhythm to what you're saying. A lot of that's actually being done down at the level of the rib cage, which is why you need this fine control. Now, there is a total enemy of this fine control. And I'm going to show you an example of it. This is an example from the Today programme. It's Charlotte Green trying to read a news story. Down at the bottom here, you're seeing the pitch of the voices. And you'll hear a news reporter coming down the line with a story where he has to say every word.
Popular replacement has now been dismissed, with the Army's popular Chief of Staff, Jack Twice, taking over.
A 40-foot sperm whale, which was stranded in the Firth of Forth for more than 4 days, is now thought to be swimming towards open waters again. It freed itself late last night. Marine experts are hoping to establish this morning whether the whale is... Good luck to the whale.
Now, there is a lot to love about that clip. I like the way the guy who's coming down the line has got to say a silly name. He's got to say Jack twice, and he just goes for it, Jack. Jack Twat, nothing to see here. Jack Twat, popular chief of staff. And then if you listen really, really carefully, somebody back in the Today studio leans into Charlotte Green and goes, Jack Twat. Points at her. I think they're doing that for one reason and one reason only. They are trying to make Charlotte Green laugh, and that's what starts to happen. But interestingly, the first thing that starts to go, by the end, she's properly laughing. She is making noises. She's gone into making sounds. But what happens first is a little period when she's okay, and then she loses control of her larynx, because what the laughter does is it comes along and it overwhelms those same intercostal muscles that you use for speaking and that you use for breathing. The laughter starts to directly affect, so she immediately loses control at the larynx, and it makes the pitch of her voice starts to go wrong even before she actually starts to produce overt laughter. If we go on and look at that in terms of the actual movement, so this is the same scale as the breath trace of me speaking earlier, you can see what you actually get, these very, very rapid deflections, which are showing the movement of the rib cage. So rather than these slow sinusoidal movements for breathing, or this rather fine, flat movement that you get for speaking, you get these big, big, big deflections, which are these individual contractions of the intercostal muscles, which is forcing air out. So laughter stops you breathing to stay alive, and laughter stops you speaking, and it only lets you breathe out. It's trying to kill you. It is definitely somewhat risky process. And interestingly, and we don't know why this is, but it always wins. So in a competition between laughter and breathing and speaking, the laughter will win. And we still don't know why that is. The example from Charlotte Green, this is a woman who for a living speaks on the radio, on live radio. She does not want to laugh. She doesn't want to lose control of her voice that way, and she still does. I've got one more example of laughter, and the points I'd like to make here is just that the forces you start to generate with these enormous movements of the rib cage start to lead to much greater pressure than you would normally get when you're speaking voluntarily. I should add, this is why laughter actually acts as an analgesic, and this is a study from Robin Dunbar showing that your pain thresholds are raised after you've been laughing. You're doing a lot of work when you laugh. You get an increased uptake of the body's naturally circulating endorphins, which act as a pain relief. Now, that's not specific to laughter. That's common to any exercise, but it's an index of the amount of work that you're doing. What this does to your voice is it means you can start making sounds you would never normally be able to make under voluntary control. You get very high pitches, you get sort of sounds when lots of individual contractions run together into one spasm. You can even get glottal whistles where a sound that occurs up here at the lips actually occurs down at the larynx, because all of your pharynx and your larynx starts to get very tightened up and constricted. So you're forcing out more air through narrower pipes. That's why it can ache in your throat when you're really laughing. So I just have one more example of laughter to play you, people trying to talk through laughter. A more famous example of people, sorry, I should just say, this is why you get the shape of laughter. You get these ha, 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 because of these individual movements. You quite often also get a big exhalation at the start, a real at the beginning of the laugh. So now I'm going to play you some real laughter again. I want you to listen to the pitches of these men's voices. Now these men, adult men, have quite low-pitched voices. See how high the pitches of their voices go when they start laughing. Oh, here we go. Again, so this is the pitch down here. One of them tells a very bad joke. And even before they start laughing, that affects the pitch of their voices.
He knew exactly what was going to happen. He tried to step over the stumps and just flipped the bail with his right hand.
Wallace tried to do the splits over it, and unfortunately the inner part of his thigh must have just removed the bail.
He just things like his leg over.
Anyhow, he did very well indeed. I think 131 minutes.
Already affected his voice.
3 falls. And then we had Lewis playing extremely well. His 47 long out. He was too solid. He was joined by the Praetors, who was in for 40 minutes, a useful little partnership there. They put on 35 in 40 minutes, and then he was caught by Louis Jean-Forche.
Now, at that point, Jonathan Agnew's laughing. Brian Johnson's voice has been affected, but he doesn't actually start laughing. Then he takes a breath, and the laughter starts to kick in. So you'll start to hear the pitch of his voice absolutely shoot up. Listen out for the glottal whistle.
Lawrence, always entertaining, kind of a 35. 34 over the week.
Yes, Lawrence.
I can do this now, I can't.
minutes off counting for 2, and there were 54 extras. And did the ball out for 419. I stopped laughing there.
This sort of stuff's really beautiful to me because, again, this is live radio. They did not want to be laughing like this. They got into trouble for this. But it's very natural in the sense of, they are genuinely, helplessly laughing. They would like to stop and they can't stop. So it's a beautiful example of what happens to your voice. It's also really fantastic how you can see as Joan Johnson gets control back over his voice. You see him getting the pitch back down as he's managing to get on top of the laughter. Something else that's very striking about this is the contagion of the laughter, because the joke itself is terribly, terribly weak. And I think one of the things that's noticeable about it is very soon they are each only laughing because they're both laughing. But Brian Johnson is saying, stop it, Agus, stop it, because that's what's making me laugh. And in fact, I've played this to undergraduates who, much too young to know anything about what's happening here, and edited out the joke, and people still laugh, because the laughter itself is contagious. It's a contagious behaviour. We catch it from people. You can be often laughing with friends without actually having any idea why they are laughing. We join in with it a lot. We've got some examples here from fantastic laughs happening, I think, a bit on our front row. We've got any nice pictures? This is Dana, who's coming to help this afternoon. And thank you very much, people whose intercostal muscles we've had a look at. And so, oh, that's lovely.
This is the first one. This is them just breathing.
OK, they are alive. There we go. That's good. So that's the metabolic breathing.
Here's the first laugh.
Oh, fantastic. So you can see these really big movements and some very fine jitters there. Oh, look at that. Lovely, lovely. A third person, slightly less amused, so I think you're allowed to. What we've done is we've taken you away from your friends, we've put you at the front, and we've all looked at you. And that's, yeah. That's not always the easiest way of laughing, isn't it? Thank you. I think you might be this one. I'm just guessing there. There we go, fantastic. Oh, you're laughing beautifully. You're laughing really beautifully. Your laughter is also great. Look, it did happen. It did happen. There we go. There you go. Thank you very much. Thank you. Go back. Thank you, Dana. Thank you. So it is, we have been trying to actually use this to look at how audiences laugh in comedy gigs, and what we found out is exactly how quickly people stop laughing if you put breath belts on them, shine lights on them, and tell them you're filming them. It's odd that, isn't it? So I got interested in laughter a number of years ago, and I was working at the Applied Psychology Unit, and thanks again for that, guys. The Applied Psychology Unit in Cambridge, and I was working with Andy Calder and Andy Young, who were working on facial expressions of emotion, and they were working with patients who had deficits in recognising the facial expressions of emotion. And they wanted to know if the deficits related to the face or if they were more generally associated with the emotion. In other words, would somebody find that if somebody can't recognise a fearful face, would they also have difficulty with a fear from another modality? And I was like, well, I do voices. I could help you with this. So I came up with a data set of non-verbal expressions of emotion that went with these facial expressions. And the facial expressions they were using are what are called the basic expressions of emotion. So they're recognised universally. You can go anywhere in the world and people will recognise what these expressions are. This is work that actually was originally started by Charles Darwin, and then Paul Ekman really picked up on in the 1960s. So you've got these emotions of happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, and surprise. And this was what they were using to test the patient's recognition of emotion, so static photographs of faces. And I had things, I came up with a set of stimuli which were sort of happy sighs and laughs for happiness, sobbing sounds for sadness, growls for angriness, screams for fear, sounds for disgust, and sort of sounds for surprise. It worked. It was okay. And indeed, the patients who couldn't recognise fear from the face also couldn't recognise a scream as being frightened. But the thing that I was really struck by was why were they all so negative? And I had an opportunity, because on a day-to-day basis, I don't experience many of these emotions, certainly not so strongly that I make a noise. I can remember once in the last year when I thought a mouse ran across my foot, I properly screamed. I stood in the kitchen and I screamed. And even as I screamed, I thought, I've got no idea why I'm screaming or what possible help I think I'm going to get in this situation, even if a mouse has run across my foot, and in fact it was a hair grip. So there we go. That was all in naught. Now, You know, I'm lucky enough not to live in a part of the world where I'm on a daily basis rendered utterly terrified or completely furious, such that I would make a noise. And I had an opportunity to speak to Paul Ekman, who'd done all this original work. These are his stimuli. And I said, why is it the case that they're so negative? There's only one positive expression of emotion in here. And my daily life doesn't feel like that. It's not a roiling sea of sobbing and being angry. And he said he thought that there would be more positive emotions that would have these characteristics of being basic emotions, being recognized all around the world in all human populations, but that they would be particularly conveyed with the voice. They might all share a smiling face, but you would differentiate it with the sound that you make. And he suggested that contentment, physical pleasure, what he called amusement, i.e. laughter, triumph and relief would be positive emotions that you might primarily express with the voice, but they would all share a smiling face. And I thought, well, this is brilliant because this is what I do. So I started out to test this. And to test the idea of a basic emotion, you need to have a number of things in place. Basic emotions are universal. So as I say, wherever you go in the world, people will recognize what these emotions are. They have distinct expressions, so they're not confusable with each other. They're based on specific neural systems. So this means a patient who has a deficit following a head injury or some sort of brain injury that means they can't recognize fear might well be still absolutely fine at recognizing disgust and happiness because the brain systems are not the same brain systems are not involved in each emotion. And they're evolutionarily ancient. They are not confined to humans. So in fact, those basic expressions of emotion from the face that you can see shown here, you can find analogues of these facial expressions in other mammals. They're not only found in humans. So to test this, we needed to do a number of different studies, but probably the most important one, the one you've got to get absolutely sorted out at first, is this an emotion which is universal? Because if it's not universal, then you can pretty much forget about everything else. For an emotion to be a basic emotion, it's got to be recognized wherever you go in the world. And we did some work showing that people in the UK, students at UCL and students in Sweden, could recognize contented sounds and physical pleasure sounds and relief sounds and amusement sounds and triumph sounds, but that's still Europe. That's not the world. So my PhD student, I should just say, I think there might be good reasons why people hadn't looked at laughter before. And I think it's because they were working with static photographs. Right from the outset, people were doing experiments on facial expressions of emotion using photographs, and very often photographs of people laughing do not look unambiguously positive. So these are two people laughing, but they could both actually be in pain. This is the clips I've taken them from, where it's much more obvious what's happening. This is an outtake from Curb Your Enthusiasm. So as soon as you have that temporal dimension, the laughter is pretty unambiguous. But you need that, and I think that's probably one of the differences about sound. You can't take a photo of a sound, so as soon as you're working with noises that we make, you've got that temporal dimension. But as I say, we need to establish, first of all, if this is a universal emotion, or if any of these positive emotions are particularly universal. So my PhD student, Disa Sota, and my postdoc, Frank Eisner, did several trips to Namibia, where they were working with the Himba, who are a population who are very unwesternized, so they're not contaminated by our culture. You find this a lot in emotion work. Some emotions are extremely culture specific and others are much more general, and we're looking for something that's much more general. So the Himba to us are great people to work with because we can be fairly certain that they haven't been exposed to the same sorts of things that we've been exposed to in our culture. So if they laugh like us or if they make relieved sounds like us and vice versa, it might suggest we've got some more basic expressions of emotion to deal with. Importantly, we didn't just play the Himba noises made by Westerners. We also recorded the Himba expressing different emotions, and we played those to the Westerners. So it's what's called a bidirectional study. We're looking to see how the Westerners recognize emotions expressed by the Himba and vice versa. This is a guy. I'm going to play this to you and then see if you can recognize what emotion he's actually expressing.
Hi!
Now, you probably spotted what happened at the end there was he started laughing because everybody else was laughing at him. The emotion, anybody guess what emotion he was expressing with the I? It's triumph. It's so, and if you ask certainly UK undergraduates, triumph, and that sort of emotion you might express if you know, your football team scored a goal, or for scientists if you get a grant. And for people, certainly in London, certainly in the UK, a kind of woohoo sound is not unusual. That's not, some people do more like a sound, you know, it's not constrained to that. But if you play the himba, a recording of us going, woohoo, they don't particularly know what that means. Likewise, back in the UK, people don't recognise I as an emotion that's expressing a triumphant feeling. So here we've run straight into an emotion where the meaning might well be universal. People know what triumph means. They know about something you might want to celebrate, but the expression is completely culturally determined. It's not a universal expression of emotion. Now, the laughter at the end there sounded very familiar. So what actually happens if we test this? What we find when you look to the behaviour, and I have to say what an enormous amount of work Disa and Frank had to do to actually, over 3 separate trips to Namibia, to get the setup right so we could be fairly confident of what we were seeing. What you find is that the negative emotions, which we're now testing from the voice, but which have been previously investigated with the face, of anger, disgust, fear, sadness and surprise, they show this bidirectional recognition. The English recognise the himba going, ugh, and the himba recognise the English going, ugh. We know they work in both directions. The only positive emotion that we tested, which was bidirectionally recognised, was laughter. So the only positive sound that both the English recognise from the himba and the himba recognise from the English is laughter. The other emotions are much more culturally variable. And that suggests that we might have evidence here for a new basic emotion. And perhaps if people have been working with videos rather than photographs right from the outset, and obviously they couldn't have done, but if they had been, perhaps laughter would have always been there, because it's a very obvious emotion when you think about it, but probably because it doesn't work so well in photographs, it had never been included. Of course, you might then think, well, of course laughter is a universal expression of emotion, because we are not the only animals that laugh. Lots of other mammals have been described as laughing. So in primates, orangutans, chimpanzees, gorillas, they've all been described as laughing and examples of it occurring. There's a video on YouTube of Robin Williams, the comedian, being introduced to Coco, the gorilla, who can sign, and she immediately starts signing to him to tickle her, really humorlessly as well. It's like, tickle me. I said tickle me. And when he tickles her, she clearly it's very obvious laughter. It's rather lovely. And then she turns him upside down and starts going through his pockets and steals his wallet. It's really, that was really very enjoyable. But you think, okay, well, you know, primates, humans, that's perhaps not a wider spread thing, but in fact, laughter has been described in other mammals, including rats. So Jan Panksepp in the US, who was working with rats looking at their distress vocalizations, and to do this, of course, because rats, like lots of other animals, make very high-pitched sounds because they're very small, much smaller than us, so we can't normally hear the noises they make. What they were doing was recording the sounds the rats made and transducing this down into a frequency range where we could hear it. When they did this, they noticed that the rats made a completely different noise when they were playing with each other. And rats are very social animals who play a lot with other rats. And they wondered, is that laughter? So they were good scientists, and they tested the hypothesis by putting on gloves and tickling the rats. And when you do this, the rats make the same sound. Now, that could still be the rat going, get off! Stop it, no! So what they did was they got a rat used to being tickled, and they put the glove in and put the gloved hand into the cage and not tickle the rat. And when you do that, the rat will sort of crib round your hand trying to get a tickle out of you. And if the same person tickles the same rat every day, they make the noise when you come into the lab in the morning, which sounds rather nice. There's a rat somewhere, pleased to see you. The really striking thing is whether you're a human, or whether you're a chimpanzee, or whether you're a rat, you first see laughter emerge when infants are tickled. So you first get the appearance of laughter when, not juveniles, infants are tickled, which is normally by a parent, not exclusively. Of course, you can't tickle yourself. It's an interactive behaviour. So right from its outset, laughter is something that you do with other people. And then it seems to carry on in that way. Laughter, in fact, is not about humour and jokes. Laughter is at its heart about social interactions. It occurs in interactions, and it's got much more to do with social bonding, which seems to be its role in infancy, than it is to do with sort of humour and jokes. So, and you can see this develop as mammals grow up. So you see the uses of laughter change throughout the lifetime. When you look at play, for example, now play is absolutely endemic amongst mammals. As far as we can establish, all mammals play. Apparently for a while there was controversy about guinea pigs, but it turns out they also play. And play is hard to define because it will vary with the animal, but it seems to include all sorts of pointless activities that involve the animal learning about things it will need to know about when it's an adult, but in a joyful and enjoyable way. What you find very strongly associated with play is what's called play face, which is very loose, open, happy smile, no tension in it. It's very hard to take photographs of adult humans that play face because they tend to tense up into a rather tenser smile. There's no sinister reason why I'm showing you the similarity between my brother and a chimpanzee. I'll just point that out to you there. Dogs are a special case. Play is so important to dogs that they have another sign. When they do this, which one of those dogs is doing, it means everything after this is a game. We're all playing here, guys. This is a game. And it means, and it's important to have these signs because the things you do in play don't have any harmful intent. You're making the point this is not something serious. And laughter is a very important part of that. When there's a noise associated with this face, it's a laugh. And Robert Profine in the US has said, at its heart, what laughter is a sign that says, I mean you no harm. I'm not going to hurt you. This isn't going to go wrong. The aim of this is enjoyment and fun, not sort of some more sinister domination. And this is really important in play. I was walking across a playing ground last year, and there were two boys playing cricket, both running for the same cricket ball, and one was much bigger than the other. They turned out to be brothers. And the bigger boy was absolutely wailing on the smaller boy to stop him from getting to the ball. And he was doing so successfully because he was much bigger. But the interesting thing was they were both screaming with laughter. And I thought that's really interesting because the exact same action, I'm bigger than you and I'm going to stop you, could have simply been aggressive. And they were the end of the story. Oh, we're done with this. I got the ball. You're smaller than me. The laughter was what was showing that it was a game, showing that this is fun. I'm not going to hurt you seriously. And it's all just to try and get the football. Obviously, brothers, so there's certain parameters on this. So you've got this sort of so this is what makes me suspect that I think if we go looking for laughter across other mammals, we are likely to find it because you find play so frequently. And then in adulthood, Robert Provine from the US has done some really interesting work showing the massive disparity between what adult humans think laughter is about and what laughter actually is about. So if you ask people what makes you laugh, they will talk about jokes and they will talk about humor. They'll talk about comedy. They'll talk about television programs they like. If you look at when people laugh, you laugh when you're with other people. It is a social behaviour. You are 30 times more likely to laugh with somebody else than if you're on your own. And you'll laugh more if you know those people, if you like those people, or if you want them to like you. So it's something that we're doing when we're with other people, when we're talking to other people. And we do it a lot. So it's been estimated that even just in sort of straightforward conversations, any one person in the conversation is laughing between 5 and 7 times every 10 minutes, which is quite a lot of laughter. Some of these conversations are just people coming in for like a psychology experiment, so it's not, like a hilarious night down the pub. If you ask people how often they laugh, they massively underestimate this. There's a factoid going around that adults only laugh 17 times a day. Well, if these numbers are right, you're laughing 17 times in about every half hour talking to somebody. You're laughing continuously throughout the day, in other words. And we're not remembering it. We don't sort of notice it. We're discounting it almost, I think. Maybe because it's simply so normal, we don't really notice it unless it's not there. Really strikingly, if you look within the conversation, so actually when people laugh in the conversation, it's been shown by Robert Provine that people hardly ever actually laugh at jokes. They're more often laughing at simple statements like, I'm going to have to go now, or yes, I will have another coffee. Things that taken out of context are simply not funny. But that's not why people are laughing at them. When you laugh with people in conversation, you're showing that you know them, that you like them, that you love them perhaps, that you're part of the same group, that you understand them, that you agree with them. That's what you're actually doing with your laughter. And any kind of laughter to do with humour is almost incidental and additional to this. And the most striking thing of all, for me, certainly, is if you look back within conversation, and this is from this Vettin and Todd study, again, at any one point in time during the conversation, the person who is laughing most is the person who's speaking. So it's actually not that we're sitting there waiting for things to make us laugh. We're actually laughing all the time when we're talking as part of the stuff that we're bringing to the conversation. It's communication. it's a communicative act. It's very often a voluntary communicative act. You can see elements of this in some data, again, from Robin Dunbar's lab. And he's looked at people having conversations via different mediums. People either having face-to-face conversation where they're in the same room, or Skype conversations where they're face-to-face but they're separated by a screen, or they're having telephone conversations, or they're having other sorts of text-based interactions like text messaging. What you find is people laugh most, are happier afterwards, and talk for longer after face-to-face interactions, whether or not the other person is there. So you laugh as much, talk for as long, and enjoy yourself as much if you're talking to them on Skype as you do if they're actually in the room with you, which I find extraordinary. I dislike Skype enormously. All I can do is think, my goodness me, my bookshelf's untidy and I need a haircut. But that's not it. That's not enough. It's getting you out. You've got the social cues there, and you respond to them more by producing more laughter and talking for longer. And that seems to be why, rather to my sadness, as I mostly work on the voice, as soon as you take away the face, go down to just the telephone, you laugh less, you talk for less long, you're less happy, and then it goes right down for text-based interactions. So as soon as you've got more of this social information there is more laughter around. If you take this into the brain, we did a study, and again, this is, I think, probably the first study that made us think laughter might be a bit different. We were looking at how people's brain responds, and this is using functional imaging technique called fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, where we're looking at big, coarse-scaled networks of activation that are correlated with our experimental conditions. And here, I had people listening to two very positive sets of emotional sounds. They were listening to laughs and cheering sounds. Or they had two very negative sets of sounds. They were hearing disgust sounds, like ugh, or screaming sounds. And I chose those originally because they were very well recognized, all of them, and they were very different in terms of positivity. So the screams and the disgust sounds are really negative and well recognized, and the cheers and the laughs are very, very positive and very well recognized. And one of the things we found was that, as you might expect, when you hear these sounds, and people just lying in the scanner listening, there's lots of auditory activation. When you hear somebody going, ugh, it's a very complex sound, and lots of auditory areas are dedicated to dealing with that. What my colleague Jane Warren noticed was that we also got lots of activation in brain areas to do with the production of facial movements and sounds. Now, these brain areas, which are involved both in perceiving something and in producing those same things. So if you look at my hand doing this, the idea is that some parts of your brain might respond both to seeing that action and also to making it yourself. It's called a mirror system. And there's been a lot of interest in this. It's a slightly controversial area because people have got a little bit wild in terms of the interpretation. But these things do exist, brain areas that are showing this mirroring response. They're showing a response both to seeing or hearing the action, here they're hearing emotional sounds, and also to moving the face or making the action sort of move your face into a smile. We deliberately included, after Jane spotted this, a condition where we asked people to move their faces so we could expressly look for brain areas activated both when you hear emotional vocalizations and when you move your face into an emotional expression. And when we did this, we found these mirror systems, which are these regions shown in green, and it seemed very interesting, but really strikingly, the effect was not there strongly in the same way for all the emotions. So in fact, it was strongly associated with the positivity of the sounds, the valence of the sounds. The more positive the sounds were, the more activation there was in these mirror systems, particularly in these lateral areas on the sides of the prefrontal cortex. And what you find is that in these regions here, the more positive the sound, the more activation there is. And what we thought was, goodness, is this the kind of contagion of laughter? When you hear someone laughing, one of the cardinal features of it, particularly for adults, and you spend a lot of your life, it seems, learning to do this, is you get ready to join in with it. The exact same thing has been shown for yawning, which is also behaviourally very contagious. It looks just like this in the brain. So we thought, do we have some sort of index of this contagion? So even though you're having your brain scanned, which is on the day-to-day basis one of the least amusing things you can do, when you hear somebody laughing, you get ready to join in a way that you don't. When somebody goes, ugh, you feel a bit contagiously emotional about it because it's not a nice sound to hear. You don't start going, ugh, along with them. In our culture yet, anyway. It's not something we've started doing. So it's maybe you're seeing this behavioural priming of the response. And that seemed quite interesting, and it certainly seemed very consistent with a lot of the things that Robert Provine's written about. But we also were very interested in the kind of the social use of laughter. This is just sequential photographs of some colleagues talking at a party, getting closer and closer as a good bit of gossip is shared. And then on the punchline, starting to laugh. Graham Hitch, standing in between them there, catches the laugh briefly, even though he's not actually in the conversation. He's getting a bit of the contagion. And I was interested in the fact that very often, particularly, you can see they've already stopped laughing. There was a very brief little moment there. They just laughed and then they stopped. That's very unlike the laughter I was playing you at the start, where people were getting absolutely helpless with laughter. And we wondered, is there a difference between these two sorts of laughs? So you can see in those sort of situations where people are helpless with laughter, it's more like an involuntary response. You're emitting it, you can't stop it. Is that different from laughter that's a lot more deliberately controlled, which a lot of conversational, remember, in a conversation at any one time, the person who's laughing most is the person who's speaking. They're not helpless with laughter, it's part of their deliberate communicative act. So it's under, at some level, it's under intentional control. And we wanted to know, are those sorts of laughs different? There's some evidence from chimpanzees that they're different. So chimpanzees laugh differently if they're being tickled than if they're making play last longer. So that sounds a little bit like this voluntary-involuntary distinction. And there's some evidence from the face that you also get something a bit like this. So there's a literature on the face about spontaneous and non-spontaneous smiling. Can anybody tell me, this is actually a picture of Paul Ekman, which of these two smiles looks nicer, the one on the left or the one on the right? The one on the right. It's very hard to see this, but in fact, the one on the left is a composite picture where the eyes are taken from a neutral face. So in fact, the smiles are the same on both. I can't see that. The way we process faces doesn't sort of let you see that kind of information. So if I block out the eyes, then you can see those smiles are the same at the mouth level, but it's the eyes that are different. And in the face literature, there's an idea that says a spontaneous smile reaches the eyes. It tends to involve the muscles around the eyes. A controlled smile is less likely to reach the eyes. I don't know absolutely how much I believe this, because I've seen America's Next Top Model, and I know Tyra Banks has got something like 21 different smiles that she does just with her eyes, and they're presumably intentionally controlled. But that's, you know, I think certainly there is empirical evidence to suggest this. There's a difference between spontaneous smiles, involuntary smiles, and more controlled smiles. So you might imagine there might be a difference in the laughs. So to look at this, we did whatever it took to make people laugh, short of tickling each other in the anechoic chamber. And this involved lots of YouTube videos. I apologise for this, not everybody enjoys slapstick, but this is an example of the sort of thing we were using just to get people laughing helplessly.
Early next week, the council also said it would continue to clear pavements, but it's warned that water supplies are now at critically low levels.
It's still dangerous for Dublin pedestrians. But the City Council has brought in private operators to help.
So, I mean, this didn't work for everybody. What worked for me, what made me laugh helplessly, was getting to watch my colleague Carolyn McGettigan listening to something that made her want to laugh. And that was all it took. And then I would start laughing absolutely without cease. So that's what we did. And we got those same people to produce social laughter. We said, imagine your friends told a joke and you're trying to join in politely. So we weren't looking for people to go, ha, 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 ha. That wasn't what we meant by a posed laugh or a sort of blah, ha, ha, ha. We wanted sort of natural conversational laughter. I've got a couple of examples here. So listen to this, see if you think it sounds like a real laugh or a posed laugh. Anyone? Real? Oh, you still go. Real? Posed? It's actually real, that one. Try this one. That's me. That's real. That's me. And here's another one. Try this. It's posed. Yeah. Now, you might imagine, actually, the real laughs are very different from the posed laughs. Do you remember all that stuff I was saying at the start about what happens when you're laughing, the forces you start to generate? So the real laughs tend to be much longer. They tend to be much higher in pitch. You get these kind of sounds and whistles that you just don't get in the pose laughs. The pose laughs, in contrast, seem to have their own thing going on. So, for example, you heard it in that laugh there. You get a nasality in pose laughs. You can do like a sort of sound. You actually physically couldn't get in real laughter because of what happens when you're laughing involuntarily. So I think probably real and pose laughs really does seem to be a distinction. They're two different ways of laughing. And as I say, we find the same things in chimpanzees. We have a little bit of data looking at how people recognize these. So this is actually from a big online experiment. We've got people from the ages of 6 up to actually into their 80s. And these are the real laughs in blue and the pose laughs in red. And here we were just asking people to rate how real, so the higher numbers are more real, the lower numbers are more posed, the laughs were. If you look in detail, 6-year-olds are at chance. They cannot tell the difference between real laughs and pose laughs. 7-year-olds get better, 8-year-olds get better, and you can see the difference continues to improve, however, until people are in their early 30s. So it doesn't kick in by the time you hit puberty. It doesn't kick in by the time you're at the end of your brain maturing in your late teens, early 20s. You are learning about laughter over your entire early adult life. In contrast, if we ask a different question, and then interestingly, actually, it doesn't particularly drop off with older age, which, lots of other things do, so yay, everything else is gone, you'll still be laughing. Here we asked a different question. Here we asked people, how contagious is the laughter? How much does it make you want to join in? And here you see a very different pattern, where children find everything a lot more contagious than older adults. So as you get older, you get a steep decline, particularly in the pose laughs. The children rate everything as being, just makes them want to laugh a lot more. The decline is much steeper for the posed laughter than the real laughter, and there's some weird bump between 40 and 50 that we don't yet understand. Maybe the menopause is hilarious, or onset of middle age is hilarious, something. So maybe it's grandchildren, maybe it's children moving away from home. There's maybe, we need to know a lot more about what's happening here. I suspect more generally that the older you get, you find stuff less contagious, because you're not going to laugh just because you hear somebody laughing. You need the people. You need the social thing there. The more you learn about laughter, the more it's part of your social life. We took this into the brain scanner because that's what we do. We're very simple sorts. So again, we did a study on laughter, and here we had people listening to the real and posed laughter, and we did not tell them that's what they were hearing. We didn't even mention laughter, and we played other sounds in there as well to sort of distract away. And what we found was that even when people are not listening, or being told to listen out for real versus posed laughter, the brain treats the two differently. So you get lots more auditory cortex activation for the real laughs, probably because you hear sounds you never normally hear. And you can see that here in these, there we go, in auditory areas. Interestingly, for the posed laughs, you get much more activity in medial prefrontal cortex, in brain areas associated with mentalizing, working out what other people are thinking. And I think what this means is, even when you're having your brain scanned, if you hear somebody going, nah, you know there's a reason why they're doing that. It's a social laugh that's been produced for some reason, and you're thinking about why. You're always trying to understand laughter. I think it's such an important social cue that we are always trying to work out what it means, and probably where it is in relation to us. I wonder how different this profile would look if you thought those people were laughing at you. What we didn't see was this orofacial mirror system that we'd seen before. And we thought that might look different between the real and the posed laughter, because I thought the real laughter is so much more contagious. Maybe you'll simply get lots more of this mirror system. You'll be primed a lot more to laugh because it's more contagious. We didn't find that at all. In fact, it did not look different between the two. However, after the scan, we gave people a short test where we asked them to classify the real and the posed laughs into real and posed laughs. And when we used that as a score, what we found was that people who recruited this mirror system more, when they were listening to any laugh, real or posed, so they are getting ready to join in with the laughter, any laugh, they're the people who get the higher scores afterwards. So it's not just contagion. When you get ready to join in with laughter, it's actually helping you understand that laughter. It's actually something about how you are able to work out what's going on around you. So we're seeing something more complex, and it would be interesting to understand how these patterns of variation actually come about. So I'm just going to finish with a couple of other laughter examples. So Laughter's been described, and I like this quote, as the shortest distance between two people. And I like that because it's kind of getting at that intimacy about laughter, that closeness, the social links that you can make with laughter. But I think there may be even more to it than this. Robert Levinson in the US has a lab where he makes a lot of different electrophysiological recordings from people with couples, when he gets couples to come in and basically have rows. He doesn't call it that, doesn't it? Here is our next paper on having a row. But he gives them a thing to discuss which will cause stress. And it will be uncomfortable to discuss. So he'll sit a man and a woman down and say to the man, tell me something that this woman does that irritates you. And he's measuring all this, the heart rate, galvanic skin response. And what you find is that people find that stressful. And you can see the stress response is increasing. The couples who respond to that change in stress by laughing together not only immediately feel better, you can actually see their stress responses change, but they're also the couples who stay together for longer. Now, if we take longevity of a relationship as some sort of general index of the success of that relationship, what this might suggest, what I think this does suggest, is actually laughter is a phenomenally important social cue that we use with the people who we are close to, and I see no reason why this won't apply to friends as well as to romantic relationships, to actually, in interactions, manage together how your mood is. And in a more successful, happy relationship, you maybe are better at keeping your mood in a happy place. I've got one example here which is not a video of a couple having a row. Unfortunately, it's another video involving ice. But this is a video which I think makes this point certainly in terms of friendship. This is a video where I've edited out the swearing. Anybody who's seen this before, no swears are about to occur. But it's young German men from former East Germany making a video to sort of support and publicise their heavy metal band. So he's about to do something terribly brave and cold. And there's a lot of, as I say, I've edited out the shouting and swearing, but there's a lot of sort of bicep kissing. There's a lot of machismo on show here.
Willst du noch eine Rede halten?
So he's clearly cold. He's got a towel. He's expecting to get wet.
Ich filme das Wasser, warte.
Here is the ice.
Eis.
The icy water.
Sogar überall rein. In der Mitte am besten da.
Ja. Ich will nicht mal gucken, nicht nach.
What might happen next? He's expecting to get wet. His friends are already laughing.
Oh mein Arsch. Oh, ich muss mich gar nicht gucken.
Helplessly laughing. And now he is.
Hey, Alter!
The point about that, I don't find it inherently amusing that he's clearly hurt himself quite badly, but as soon as he does not go through the ice as they're expecting him to, and as soon as there's not actually blood and bone everywhere, all his friends start laughing and then he does. And that's leading, presumably, to I think probably immediately to actually turning an unpleasant situation into a funny, enjoyable situation. But that's something that what friends do. That's something you can actually manage this, potentially somewhat awful or embarrassing or awkward in situation into something that you're sharing, that you're actually finding something positive in. So I think laughter is even more important than being a close distance between people. I think we actively and continuously try to find ways to use laughter to actually close those distances. Now, I'd like to say thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much to the enormous number of people who've worked on all this with me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that. It was absolutely brilliant. I haven't heard so much laughter in lecture theatre in years and years and years. I'm Frank James. I'm Professor of History of Science here and host for this evening, and I'll exercise my usual host's privilege and ask the first question. Did I understand correctly that when you did this sort of analysis between Namibia and Europe,
yeah,
laughter was the only positive emotion
Yes, bidirectionally recognised.
Right, so
yeah.
what's happening there in evolutionary terms?
I think probably the idea with basic emotions is that they are sort of things that tend, there's a sort of, I'm trying to not use the word innate, can you spot that? That they're behavioural possibilities that tend to be very easily encouraged in a way that's actually always very similar. So it's not just that the emotion is similar, the expression of it is similar. So there's like an action pattern that can be produced. I think the example of laughter, I think one of the things that makes laughter so very, very similar, and in some ways very odd, is its incredibly basic way of making a sound. You could basically just squeeze someone's rib cage and they would make that same noise. And that's why babies are able to do it. You don't have to do anything at the larynx or anything above. It's all happening down here, which is where babies first have motor control. So it's, it's a very basic way of getting a sound out. And if you compare that to speech, there's so much complexity from the waist upwards going on when you're talking. There's simply almost no point of comparison.
Right, okay. Right, we've got time for comments or questions. Yes, over there. Can you wait for a microphone to come? And if you're on the gallery, do wave wildly, because I've got some extremely bright lights pointing at me.
That was just brilliant, and I'm sure we're all going to live several years longer for that talk, so thank you so much for that. Is there evidence that laughter therapy actually has an effect on people's mood, for example, for depression and so on? Is there evidence that that's actually effective?
There's still not hard evidence for laughter therapy. So laughter therapy is things like laughter yoga, where you kind of encourage laughter as a behaviour. That, as a standalone therapy, hasn't been shown. What that has been shown is that laughing does change your, as you've seen it, I very briefly mentioned, it increases your uptake of endorphins, it reduces your adrenaline levels, it reduces over a longer time scale your cortisol levels. So it's really associated with relaxing. And it feels good. This is one of the reasons why it feels good. I think for me the important thing about laughter, and something I'd like to know more about laughter and mental health, is the way that it's showing us something about the interactions that people have. So for, if you look at depression, we've done lots of work by saying, here's a depressed person, why are they depressed? What we're not saying is, what's that depressed person's social network like? Is there a lot of laughter in it? How does the laughter work? Is the laughter an index of the nature of the interactions they have? So that's, I think, also a very interesting side of it.
Please.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm fascinated by the fact, like the first question, is laughter really the only one? Is it subdivided? Because I feel that there's a sort of a grin, a sort of St James end to the laughter that is quite different to the infectious one.
Well, I think that's a really good point, because I think what's probably true is that involuntary laughter is the most basic example of it. So we're trying to find a way of doing this, and it's hard to get involuntary laughter in the UK. I don't know how we're going to do it in Namibia. We're not going to do it. But the thing is that I suspect that voluntary laughter might be a lot more culturally variable, because it's likely to be shaped by the things that have influenced the other ways that influence how you speak. Whereas I suspect that involuntary laughter, so those ridiculous laughs I played you at the start, they're all involuntary, and they're extreme examples of that, but I think they're less likely to be modified by culture, which is presumably why that lady would prefer, on the whole, not to be snorting when she laughs, but that just happens to be what happens when she does. So it's something we're trying to look at, but it's going to be hard.
Thanks.
Please.
I just wondered, based on your research, whether you had any advice for any budding science comedians in the audience.
I think... oh, God.
Fight Club at UCL?
Well, UCL does make its scientists do and researchers do stand-up comedy, and I would say generally, as a human, not as a sort of, that it's an incredibly useful thing to get some experience with, because it changes how you do talks. You feel so much more. You think, I can do that. I can literally do anything. I've stood on a stage and people didn't start to throw their shoes at me. I think it made me more interested in how laughter works in audiences, and it is something we've been trying to look at using some of these sorts of techniques, because I suspect actually that a lot of, if you think of wild-type laughter as being something that happens in conversation, is stand-up comedy like a weird version of a conversation where, in fact, nobody else talks and one person does, but maybe they're doing all that sort of entraining stuff that we do. When we're talking to people, we start to breathe together, we start to converge in all sorts of aspects of our behaviour. So is the comedian actually doing that to the audience to get them to laugh at the right time, because it is true that timing is really important. I was talking to a comedian recently, he was saying he used to put in his act, after he got everybody laughing, he would tell statements that had the structure of jokes but which weren't funny, and people will laugh once. They'll laugh a second time. After a third time, they're like, no, you're not laughing anymore because you're not being very funny. But, you know, up to that point, he's kind of gotten to a point where there's something more than just the words he's saying that's making people laugh. He's also kind of got them, he's entrained them somehow into laughing at the right point. So I'm interested in that kind of aspect, because that's what happens in conversations, is that's actually what's happening on the stage, like a weird conversation.
There and then there. And then
Have you done any research?
I'm sorry, I'm still. There we go. Hello.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Have you done any research relating to the culture of the Islamic veil? Because it seems to me there's a very rich area there relating to the whole process of behaviour and interaction.
It is very interesting. I think my understanding is once people get home, these things come off. So there's still going to be lots of situations where the whole face is visible. But, you know, I'm going to be absolutely honest, my entire experience of this is one friend from Syria. So put that on my, okay, put your framework on my understanding of the Muslim world into that window. That's my insight. But it's also the case that we get a huge amount from the eyes, much more than, I mean, everybody thinks, you know, you're growing up, you're taught to think a happy face is a smiling mouth. There's a huge amount going on here, and particularly here. There's the number and the change in the movements around the eyes remains incredibly important. So presumably, that's enough to get by to a certain amount. But yes, for most normal purposes, you would imagine that having the whole face visible would result in more of the, you know, so if we go back to the example of face-to-face conversation, it would be very interesting to know what it would do to that in terms of duration of interactions, amount of laughter. Is that changed if you have less face visible?
Please.
In that episode where the man said, you know, go and dive in, and he didn't, and he skidded across, I didn't laugh. I was worried in case he was hurt.
Yes.
I didn't think it funny.
I don't show that because I think his fall is funny. I'm interested in their laughter happening so quickly. But there is a really interesting, I deliberately don't talk about humour because I think once you get to humour, most of the time when we laugh at humorousness isn't where you find laughter. Laughter's a social phenomenon. But also, just the wide variety of things that people find funny it's like our aesthetic tastes in music or art or books. It's totally different. And people and psychologists have tried to find a structure of something that would be funny to everybody. And you can always find somebody for whom it will not be funny. There's a very funny clip in the, most people will find funny. The online newspaper, The Onion, had a really old article with the headline, "That's not funny, my brother died that way." And it's sort of, I see you're all enjoying your conversation about Police Academy 3 and the scene where somebody falls off a motorbike and gets their head stuck up a horse's bottom. Well, that happened to my brother and he died. And so there'll always be somebody, so you can imagine a world in which the man who'd fallen on the ice would be the person who did not find that a funny situation. There'll always be, there's no sort of perfect scenario which the whole world will find amusing. There will always be somebody for whom it is a highly unamusing thing.
Please.
You've just answered my question because I was just going to ask whether you found anything that was kind of universally funny. But it seems to me that people often laugh perhaps at the absurd or the subversive quite a lot. Do you find that?
I deliberately steer away from actually analysing what it is they're laughing at. Partly because it's interesting, but it's a different question. It's a question of aesthetics, and that's simply not. I'm a voice person trying to. It's almost a more tangible question. The laughter side of things, the humour side of things, is much more complex. And I think I'd probably have to say whereof no, I don't know. I'm going to stop speaking. I just couldn't say. I wouldn't be at all surprised, but that might also be very culturally variable.
There, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, sorry, there first.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, my fault. I'm gazing the wrong way.
Regarding the
Sorry.
lady at the front and the comment about the man falling on the ice, Villanor Ramachandran places great emphasis on an evolutionary reason for laughter, and that is it tells our confreres not to waste energy coming to his rescue, but carry on as usual. He's not hurt. And
Well,
if there was, as you said, there was no blood and bone,
Yeah.
so we can go on as usual, and that's quite an evolutionary advantage in energy.
I think it is. And I think also, if you think of laughter as being something to get everything back onto the page, like we're good here, we're happy, no one's hurt, we're all okay. I think a lot of laughter, a lot of what people mean by when they talk about nervous laughter, is laughter that occurs in situations where people are trying to normalise a situation and get we're all right with this, aren't we? And sometimes, if there's just one person trying to do that, I mean, imagine if I dropped a glass now and shattered some expensive vase. If I went like, ha, 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 and nobody else laughed, my laughter would be nervous solely because nobody else is joining in. If everybody else laughed as well, ha, ha, she broke a vase, then I'd be okay. My laughter would no longer be nervous. So I think it's always the setting is what kind of gives laughter, and its context is what gives laughter its meaning. But that's a good example of it.
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you. During the past week, there's been a television documentary on the publishing company Amazon. I rarely experienced a more driven person than the CEO, the owner of Amazon.
Mm.
All the colleagues who were interviewed were appalled at his constant, raucous laugh. What are your thoughts about laughter being a mask?
A mask? I think it's probably a very effective mask. I mean, again, if you think of it as being a sign that you're... you did say mask, didn't you? Yeah. I think it can be used by somebody, again, if you're trying to deflect or turn away aggression, laughter is quite a useful tool, and it can be used, but it can also be used in a way which suggests, if you suggest that you are laughing at somebody, or that you are kind of distancing somebody with your laughter, that's also highly unpleasant. So I was at Ipswich railway station a couple of years ago, and I felt a tap on my shoulder, and I looked up, and there was nobody there. And then I heard laughter from over here. Some teenagers were laughing at me because I'd looked the wrong way. Hilarious, isn't it? You know, Ipswich, they were probably headlining at the main theatre. But I'd seen them on the train being Larry. I just thought, you know, two different worlds. I didn't care that we were probably... I didn't think, oh, there's teenagers, we'll all be friends one day. And I hadn't gone to Ipswich railway station to meet men. But as soon as they laughed at me, as soon as they showed that, because their laughter wasn't evil laughter, their laughter was positive, friendly in that group, but they were showing absolutely they cared so little for me that they didn't mind that they marked the enormous social gulf between us by laughing at me. It was awful. So I think you can induce, particularly if you throw status into the equation, I think you can use laughter in a way that will induce fear, because people will be discomforted by it and if particularly if they're scared, they want to join in because you're a senior person, but they don't want you to laugh at them. You know, so it's not a universally positive thing. It absolutely depends on where you perceive yourself to be in relation to the laughter. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if it couldn't be used as quite a bullying tool.
I've got lots of people queuing up, so please.
Sorry. Following on from that, actually, the examples that you showed today, much of it is slapstick, right? But interested in the Curb Your Enthusiasm example, which is the ultimate awkward, painfully social situations expressed in plot and language, which is so totally different than a catalyst that would be slapstick. I mean, is there any difference in the reaction depending on that stimulus?
I'm trying to think. I don't think anybody's directly asked that question. I think because laughter is primarily something you find in social interactions, the majority, and I have to say it is a tiny amount of research. If you've got all the laughter researchers in the world and all the fear researchers in the world, let's just say you probably want to back the fear football team. You know, there's so many orders of magnitude more people. There's so few people looking at laughter. But within that, most of the work that's done on laughter is looking at laughter and interactions. There's a lot. I can't immediately think of anybody who's looking at if people laugh differently based on different humorous stimuli. I wouldn't discount the possibility, but I can't actually give you a good answer to that because I don't think it's been done.
Right, someone in the gallery waved, yes.
It kind of draws on what we've discussed a while ago. I'm wondering if laughter has always had the same function. I remember reading that originally it was actually mainly a reaction to fear, a sound that was supposed to scare a predator off, and it kind of makes sense because it does sound like barking sometimes, for example. So I wonder whether it evolved to have other functions later.
I think the fact that it appears so incredibly early, it's the first positive vocalization you get out of human babies, and it emerges around the time that they would be born if they could be carried to full term. I think that seems to speak to its social role, and the fact that it does exactly that same thing in chimpanzees and rats suggests that it's that first emergence in infancy. It's probably, hopefully, the job of the parents to scare off predators rather than the babies. Let's all not leave it to the babies, probably. But I think the fact that it's emerging in these interactions, and the interactions are positive interactions where presumably everybody's feeling safe. This seems to speak to this social bonding. And that carries on. So even in comedy venues, there's lots of things about the actual space you put people in that means they will laugh more if they feel comfortable. People will laugh a lot less if they're brightly lit or it's an echoey room. It's all sorts of, so, you know, even in a comedy situation where what's eliciting your laughter is humour, you're still very sensitive to the sort of feeling around you. So it seems to be something to do with positivity and bonding rather than, I think, an attempt to scare.
Okay, please, at the back.
Hi there. Has your research and your understanding of laughter changed how you interact socially?
It's made me quite psychotic, actually. I would be. It's made me pay a lot more attention to laughter. So, for example, has anybody here had the experience where there's somebody they know who seems to laugh really inappropriately? I think most people know someone who's always like, ah, ha, 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 and you're like, why are you doing that? You know. So I know somebody who does that. I have a relative who does that. And my work on laughter has made me notice that actually there's nothing wrong with her laughter at all. What's odd about it is I don't join in. And I experience that as her doing something wrong, whereas actually it's me. I'm like, whew, I don't think we have that kind of relationship. You're not getting a laugh out of me. So, and I'm almost totally misreading the situation. Going back to that W.H. Auden quote, you know, you laugh with people because you love them, and you don't love them. You're not getting my laughter. I think that, and so it has made me listen to it differently. The other thing it's made me notice is that, you know, we'll say, oh, so-and-so is so brilliant. They've got a fantastic sense of humour. I laughed all day. What you mean is, I absolutely adore so-and-so, and I laugh all the time I'm with them because I really like them. You know, it's made me see that we attribute our laughter to people, whereas in fact it's something we're expressing about how we feel about them. That's actually at the heart of it. So as I say, I've become a real pain of a friend. I wouldn't recommend it.
Please.
Thank you. I didn't know quite what to expect, and I think you've just hit on it with the comedy, because Victor Borge was a musician as well. And I particularly remember Jack Brymer, the clarinetist, in a quartet with the psychologist running it, and now I'm thinking, talking about music in the mind. And afterwards he said something about how he enjoyed it because he was playing with friends. And by the end of the piece, everybody in the room, not just the musicians as they're doing quartets, but everybody in the room was breathing at the same time.
Yeah.
And you're talking about this area which, in terms of wind playing, in terms of music, which is a much more sophisticated, but it's about communication between people. So
I think it is. It's communication and entrainment, and we like doing things where we entrain our behaviour with other people. We like dancing together. We like much more than dancing on our own. You know, it's simply enjoyable. Lots of you know. I don't think we'd like Strictly Come Dancing if it was just one person. It's my belief. But you know, in religious ceremonies, or in all cultures of the world, you find joint speech used where you want people to kind of commit to something. So we play on it. We know about it at some level. We understand the importance of that. And I think, I wouldn't be at all surprised if what was happening in those musical situations wasn't very similar to what was happening in a comedy audience.
Please.
Hi. I was just wondering, you talked a lot about tickling. I've always thought it's a slightly strange thing that a physical interaction can result in laughter.
Yeah.
Have you had any thoughts about that as a result of your work? And
I've come to the conclusion there's a lot of ideas about tickling. So you physically can't tickle yourself because you don't respond to touch or actually any sensation that you've generated. Your brain deals with differently than touch from other people or sounds from other people. And there's an idea that says, for example, tickling's evolved as a way of protecting particularly vulnerable parts of the body, like the armpits and the soles of the feet. Wouldn't you think like the eyeballs or the throat? Why wouldn't they be really ticklish? So I suspect that the only reason we are ticklish is to get laughter going. I think where ticklish parts of the body are very safe parts of the body. They're not near any naughty bits, and and you can sort of safely do it. You can safely touch in a way that can lead to laughter, and actually not necessarily in a pleasant way. Most people find tickling, or it's not unusual to find people find tickling quite aversive. I said this at the Royal Society meeting a couple of years ago, and an elderly gentleman came up to me and said, "I'm very ticklish." Not going to tickle you, sir. Not going to find that out. So, there's variation. But I think that's... I think it's probably the only reason tickling exists, is just because I think laughter is really important to us. And I say us, I mean mammals, and that's probably why.
And one last question.
Is the sound of the laughter that you produce affected by your upbringing, or is it just there?
I suspect it may be different between voluntary and involuntary laughter. So I think involuntary laughter, those examples I was playing at the start where people can't stop, I think that's a lot less affected by your, by all the experiences you've had. I suspect that genuine laughter, more voluntary laughter, more posed, more social laughter, laughter you're choosing to produce, I suspect that would be more likely to be modified by your cultural expectations, which goes back to a point made over here. I wouldn't be surprised if involuntary laughter is more universally similar than, and posed laughter more culturally variable.
Thank you.
Well, with that, I've got to draw the evening to a close. I'm sorry, many of you have missed the opportunity of having asked a question, but I'm sure Professor Scott will be delighted to come back at some point and sort of, give us another wonderful discourse. So thank you so much for this evening.
Thank you. Thank you.